you'll see that there are some awesome changes that are really important to our unique children of today. So this is a quote from CAST, and CAST is our national UDL gurus that we admire and we love to learn from as well. But they are just really setting the tone that these UDL guidelines are a tool to guide us to design everything in our classrooms, from the environment to the learning, and just help us honor and value every learner, as we see very important.
And I think that this year, that's one of the big shifts is they've really shifted to that language of design. I think a lot of times before when we talked about universal design for learning, like people were like, what does it like? How do I do it? And it's really about teachers putting into place into their practices and designing environments and opportunities for students to connect to that learning in ways that break down those barriers. And so that leads us to this year, which is 3.0. The big shift for 3.0 is that idea of design. And in previous years, when we talked about what were we designing, they really looked at the students and the environment, or the environment and barriers, but we didn't necessarily design around who our learners are. And the new shifts really focus on looking at who our learners are and what kinds of things do they bring to the table, and how can we connect those students and their talents and gifts into our classroom and bring them into our spaces. Um, we like to talk a lot about our UDL talks is like the position is barriers are not in the students, like barriers are in the environments. And so the 3.0 guidelines are really shifting to that idea that a barrier into learning can be focused on that idea of like learner identity, and that can really sometimes cause disconnect in where students sit in their learning and in their environments and how they connect to that. And so um, that's where we're going to kind of focus on these new shifts.
The key point one is this is some of the changes that they've made, like I said, because of brain science and just research and the way that our students' populations are and the different barriers that we've been encountering in the classroom. Really wanted to incorporate identity, the identity of the student, and the who are the students that we're teaching. And I think we, as their teachers, know our students, but who knows them better than us, them, right? And so it really focuses on that learner agency. And we want them to be the ones that really know themselves, because I think as we talk to educators across the state, we learn a lot of us didn't really know who we were as learners. There's a few that we talked to that are like, oh, fourth grade, I knew, or sixth grade, I knew, but most people are saying like adults. And we really want to empower the students to know, okay, what strategies work best for you? What resources can you use to make you an independent learner and help your learner agency?
And then I think the other piece of that that really ties in with that is that creating a sense of safety in our communities and our classrooms, because that safety and community is the piece that helps bring our students in so that they can take learning risks and that they can voice what they need, and that they feel safe to do that, because learning is a risk and it's scary and we don't always know. Um, well, we're not experts, right? Like we're not, we're there to learn. And so it's again that idea of how can we make students feel secure in that space, that this is not a place where they're going to be judged, but a place where we're going to kind of challenge and push and prod, but that we're also going to accept them and welcome them for all of their different variabilities as learners. So one of our goals today was kind of to help you guys tie that directly into like, what does that look like in the classroom? The guidelines actually dig really deeply into naming these things, but we just wanted to share some really quick ideas about how do we bring in that learner identity and make that learning feel connected for students and make them and whoever they are safe in all of the ways that they come to school. So we're going to share this little video that Becky made for us. She's not here with us right now. If I can, maybe. Why do I always get stuck on this, guys? What am I doing?
It's weird. It should have played. Just
Yeah, the button is just right there on mine.
Is that? I'm going to back
it
out.
was. Maybe get out of the show and then hit play.
There it is. There you go.
No. Do you know where she? That's okay. Jump to the next one and let me work on it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll share that one in a minute. And if it doesn't work, we can just go directly to the website. If you don't know already, we have social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and X. And so we do like to share practical tips and tricks along with fun little learning bits that we've been doing as a UDL team. These are some examples of some slide decks that we've done for Instagram recently. This month is Hispanic Heritage Month. And so this is one of those tips that we have for bringing learners into their bringing them and their identities into the classroom. And so it says, I'm going to read it for accessibility. Just, I know you all can read, but in case somebody couldn't, it says, tú puedes hacerlo. You can do it. And it's that idea again of, can we use language as a resource? How can we incorporate, we're a diverse state, we're a bilingual state. It's actually written in our Constitution as a state that we hold both English and Spanish as languages. And so how can we bring in bilingualism and translanguaging, which is like that use of English and Spanish, or like the blending of the two together into our lessons. And so this is a fun tip that we wanted to share with you, which is just to have kids work through, build a vocabulary wall in another language, for our case this month, Spanish, and then have them write bilingual stories about their family histories. And that could be a really fun way to, again, welcome that identity and say that you're safe in this space. And then I think also for our students who are English language learners, it lets them know that that other end of like, we're willing to take the risk in a different language as well, even though we might not be experts. And so it then conveys again that safety of, you might want to take that risk in practicing your English with us, and both ways are safe and good. Were we able to get this one up, Janae? Maybe?
Yes, I just messaged you the link. Double click on it while off screen and see if it'll pop up and give you the YouTube.
Okay. Awesome.
There you go.
This is the teacher's website where she curates book lists for around different topics. For example, a book list about names, National Hispanic Heritage Month, cancer. So she has lots of topics, anything you can think of, she has a book list for, especially some of those hard topics. This is a great way to address those in the classroom and support your students and bring their home life into the classroom. It also is a great way to present culturally and socially relevant material in your classrooms in a safe manner. So if you're interested in a book list, you can select the topic, and it will take you to a new web page where she gives you some information about the topic. And then you can click here again and it will open up a PDF with book titles or book covers, I'm sorry. And then you can click on the cover of the book. It will take you to the Amazon page where you can read a synopsis of the book. And instead of buying them, we really suggest using your resources like the online libraries like Hoopla and Libby and even Epic. They have a lot of the titles there, or even your school library as well. So check out the book lists and bring those topics into your classroom so students can see themselves and see that representation within their classrooms.
I feel like we should say thank you, Becky.
And
Thank
yes, before we go on to key point number 2, with some of the changes to the UDL guidelines, we just wanted to give it some time for you to share out and maybe collaborate some and figure out like, how are we already doing this in our classrooms? Would anybody like to share maybe how they're recognizing individual student strengths or culture or individuality?
If maybe you can't think of something off the top of your head, or if you are not enjoying talking out loud, you can type something in the chat too.
Some different ways that I've always done in the classroom would be like, we did the World Children's Day back at the Montessori school I worked at. Alexis, I actually saw you there last year for training. And we have the kids bring in food, different foods from different cultures, from the different countries that their report is on. So
Love that.
that's one way that we brought culture into the classroom.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Denise is giving you hearts. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing. Again, within there, that just that idea of identity, and it can mean so many things, but being welcoming and thoughtful about how we welcome kids into our spaces is really important. Tied in with that is our second key point. This also really fits under that engagement strand of the UDL guidelines. And again, that engagement strand is that it's that very first part of our brain that is the part of our brain that allows learning to begin happening. So like before we can really start to learn, our brains have to feel excited, and then they also have to feel safe in their environment. And within there, that's where the UDL guidelines have really started to shift in their thinking about what makes a brain feel excited or safe. And in this case, one of the key points that they've really wanted us to recognize again is that acknowledging individual, institutional, and systemic biases and barriers to learning without limits. I think this one is an extra hard topic to sit with, and is also like an uncomfortable topic to talk about. But I really do appreciate that the UDL and CAST has really started to think about what does this mean for teachers and for students. I was sharing with Candace earlier that when I look back at my education, there's a lot of places where I feel like there were barriers based on maybe where I sat as an individual in a community. And I should have been more successful than I was in a lot of ways. And I ended up dropping out of high school and getting my GED, and then like immediately starting college the next year. And then now I have my master's. But um, I think, recognizing that sometimes school can be a barrier to kids in the sense of like the institution of it and what it represents is hard to talk about, but also I think a really important thing to focus on as we shift to that kind of conversation. So one of the things that I thought we could do is just, if you can sit for a minute, if you have a piece of paper or a notepad, um, is if we could take a second to think about our identity bubbles. And so in this example, I might write my name in the center. Different identity bubbles that we can sit with might be our gender. It might be our religion. It might be our culture. It might be our profession. So if you can take a minute and just, I'm going to do like 1 minute, think about some areas that you sit in your identity and write those identity circles down. And then I'll kind of share with you like what mine would be. This is always the hardest part for me as a teacher, wait time. Wait time. I'm just going to do about 10 more seconds. Awesome. If you're still working on yours, feel free, but I'm going to go ahead and just identify some of my identity bubbles. So one of mine would be, I'm a woman. That would be one of my identity bubbles. And so in that experience as a woman, I sit and I have certain viewpoints that a man might not have. That's one of my identity bubbles. For my religion identity bubble, I identify as Catholic. That means that I grew up like going to church on Sundays, and I had to sit in a pew and be really quiet. And I had to pay attention to adults around me about standing up and sitting down. So that identity bubble gives me some different experiences than maybe somebody who identified as like Southern Baptist and like would stand up and like sing and shout and those kinds of things. And so that's one of my identity bubbles. Another one of mine is mother. Because I'm a mother, I sit in a very specific view of the world, and I might think differently about children or that experience, the experiences around children than someone who wasn't a mother. My cultural identity bubble would be what I would call Chicana. I identify as Chicana because for me, my family lived back and forth between New Mexico and Mexico, like this area, my whole life, and for like since the 1500s. And so I think like that's a really unique situation that my family grew up in, and that gives me different perspectives about New Mexico and the land. And then I think my other one, I think that's probably enough. But the idea would be to look at your identity bubbles and start to think to yourself, what experiences do they bring to you? What viewpoints do they help you understand, or what viewpoints do they give you because of your experiences? Like if I was super wealthy, I might think differently about money versus somebody else. But again, it's that idea of, we're going back to that idea of bias, right? So we all sit with these different little identity bubbles. And in those identity bubbles, sometimes we can have certain opinions based on our own experiences, but we also, through the UDL guidelines, they're recommending that we start to really think about what are those bubbles and how do they make us react to different bubbles that our students might have. And so I gave that example of like, I'm Catholic, and so I sat at church and I knew how to sit quiet in a pew, but somebody else might have gotten up and sang, and it was okay to like clap during church. And so recognizing that our students might have those different experiences sometimes will help us kind of take a pause back and then realize, this might be because of my particular experience that I feel this way. Can I think about my students and what their experiences might be and help connect that? And so with that, we have the work of Shiraki Hawley. He's amazing. He's a culturally responsive practitioner, and his big thing is that schools are one kind of environment, and then we have our home environment, right? Like that identity bubble of our home environment, and they don't always mash up, right? Like we know that the expectations and culture of school is different than the expectations and culture maybe of home. And it's not to say that one is right and one is wrong, but sometimes we need to help students connect that culture from home to that culture of school in a way that makes them feel safe, and that they can still be vulnerable and take risks in learning, but that they also learn what is the expectation culture of school. And so he recommends babbing is what he calls it, and I love it. He says, if you are in a particular situation, Candace likes to talk a lot about like the coffee table. We talk about like feet on the coffee table, right? Like you're either a house where the feet on the coffee table is a yes, or you're a feet on the coffee table no. And so when you get to school, that might mean I might throw my feet on my desk and at home, that's always okay because we put our feet on the coffee table at home. And at Candace's house, it might be a no-no. And so if she were in a classroom and she were to look up and see a student that had their feet on their desk, Babbing would have her, or that idea of like remembering our biases, remembering our rings, it might make her go, this is the culture that I grew up in, where my mother said we must take care of our things and we don't put our feet on the table. But it's that moment of pausing and saying, can I take a pause for a minute? Let me think about, is this a like universal thing or not? And if it's not a universal thing, which almost nothing in life is, can we then take a moment to think about this and say, you know what? I see that you've got your feet on the table. Let's validate that. Like, you must be feeling really comfortable right now in this classroom, right? And then that brings us to a different perspective than being like, hey, no feet on the classroom, like you're 5 minutes off of recess or whatever it happens to be that might feel reactionary because of our own identity bubble, but recognizing, you feel safe. I'm glad. That's awesome. And then that affirming is that idea of like, great. I'm so glad that you feel safe and connected in this classroom. You belong here. And it's okay that you might not know these things. And that's really condescending talk. And so I'm like, I'm so bad at that part of it. But the piece that like I'm trying to convey is like, you're okay. And then the build the bridge is like, in this situation, can we remember that our feet stay down on the ground? Or if you really feel like you need your feet up, can I give you this as another choice for your feet? And so that's that building bridge that helps our kids connect and feel, again, safe, but asks us to pause barrier-wise. I'm going to pause for a second there and kind of let everybody sit with that. If anybody has thoughts, feelings, anything that they want to share, add, I would really appreciate it.
This
So
just kind of makes me think about a training I did with Safe and Civil Schools last year, where a lot of times with some of those behaviors that our kids have, we just automatically assume, but maybe their culture is very different at home. And we just kind of have to kind of take a step back and say, from my perspective, this is what I'm seeing. Can you explain from your perspective what you meant by your behaviors?
I love it, Adine. Yes, yes. It's so hard though, isn't it? Because like I forgot that was the other thing that I wanted to say about bias is that like our brains are pattern makers, right? Like our brains are pattern makers and they are looking for patterns and they are looking to put things into pockets. And so just because we feel a certain way doesn't mean that we're like bad or that we're wrong, or because I feel like so often like teachers, we get that like message of like, you're doing things wrong. And it's like, I think it's not that, it's just that idea of like, my brain is a pattern maker. I have to stop and evaluate, is this pattern a true pattern, or is this assumption a true assumption, or is it based on a pattern that my brain has picked up on or that my brain looks for, right? I love that. Anybody else have any connections? Awesome. Well, if you get a chance, Dr. Holly has some really other amazing stuff that is responsive to, again, identity. And so like things like call and response is a big way that we can connect to students' cultures, different things like that. And so his work is really good. And he does a lot of really like practical applications of really theoretical ideas. So please take a look at his stuff if you ever get a chance.
We have some great comments in the chat too.
Oh, I missed.
Yeah. Janae said that this fits perfectly with the UDL framework by the conversations we have. We are all providing a voice for the students and a choice. And then Selena said, I used to get sent in the hallway during math in high school because I asked too many questions. And I wanted to add too, I started my teaching career as a fourth grade teacher, And I just kind of expected my students to come to me knowing how to line up, right? And I would tell them my expectation, we'd talk about it, we'd practice it. But I didn't realize that I needed to continue that throughout the year. Like every day was a new day, it felt for them. And posting it, practicing it, having a counter to make sure they're doing it quickly. Like little things like that were aha moments for me as a new teacher to realize my expectations, like I knew what I wanted, but I had to actually teach those. And because not everybody has the same ideas on how to line up. And to them, it was not a big deal to be talking or to be, hustling to the line. But if I wanted it a certain way, I needed to make sure that they knew that expectation. And so it can be simple things too, and the environment that we have for our students, and that's all related to UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and making sure that that they're feeling good about it, and we're not having those frustrations either. Okay, so we're gonna move into, nobody else wants to add anything? No? Okay, we're gonna move into key point 3 now, which I think is near and dear to a lot of our hearts as teachers, making sure a lot of us know the value of group work, know the value of working together and collaborating. We're all here to get today together for a reason, right? Our cafes are fun. We get to put our heads together. We get a problem solve, strategize. And that's really one of the emphasis is that interdependence, not independence necessarily. I mean, that is part of the UDL framework, but they're wanting to make sure that we practice that interdependence of making sure that students are comfortable working together and not just, I'm in a group, I'm going to get an easy ride today. Like I'm not going to have to think, I'm not going to have to work, but making sure that we're having that collective learning opportunity for students and that they have chances to grow. We always tell teachers, how many of us were social learners and got in trouble for talking or for asking questions too much, in class? And this really helps those students that really need that social piece to learn from each other.
And then I also want to add that, again, the stronger that we build our communities within our classroom, I think the more harmonious our classrooms are. And so it's like, it all ties back in again. So if we have to rely on each other for our learning or how our class functions, then that in the end really means that we're one community. And so we're working towards that same goal of being an educational community or that community of learners, right? Which is our drive. Like, why do we show up to school every day? To learn. And if we all are in that same thing together, we understand and feel like we're a part of that, then we have that connection. So with that, I wanted to share one of my most favorite teaching methods with you guys, and it's Jigsaw. Can you guys do a thumbs up or any kind of, do you love it? Do you know it? Does anybody not know Jigsaw? Most of us do, it seems like. I will give like a real teeny snippet of Jigsaw if you're not familiar with it, or for those of us who are not. So Jigsaw starts out with these homogeneous groups. And so it's kind of a little bit tricky to see, but there's 4 little puzzle pieces here that are green. There's 4 little puzzle pieces that are purple, 4 little puzzle pieces that are pink, and then 4 little puzzle pieces that are black. Typically, I love a jigsaw when we have like reading content that is way too big and one kid can't sit and do it all, or you're going to spend the whole day just reading. This is a really easy way to get everybody to get all of the information, but not necessarily be burdened by the time of it all. So if it were a topic, my brain goes back to 4th grade CKLA, which was the Renaissance. And so we were learning about feudalism. And so it might be that you were learning about the serfs were one. Somebody might be learning about the knights, and then the royalty would be the third one. And then maybe the other one were like the workers. Instead of having everybody read the whole passage, we could go through and assign each group one of those contents. They would work together as the experts of that group to gather and read information about that content, and then we would just mix them up into these colored groups where we took maybe that first student who had learned about the surf and he was in the green, and we took one of the students who learned about the knights and they were in the pink, and we took the students who learned about the royalty in the purple, and then the students who learned about the workers in the black, and then we put them into a new group, and then their job is to then teach each other about what they've learned. Some really amazing research around Jigsaw. Jigsaw actually started, I can't remember his name right now, and I should have written it down, but he actually he was like the student of Maslow and like this statistician. And when his job was to come into classrooms in New York City when they were first moving away from segregation. And so they had these really diverse populations who had never been in an environment together. And so he was really trying to figure out, like, how do we get these kids to cooperate and work together in a way that is collaborative and that they're learning. And so he developed this method of Jigsaw. And so what we know now from all of this research in the school is that students who get the opportunity to do Jigsaw are better learners. They learn because they're teaching each other, right? Like they have a vested interest in it. They're tied into that community and it's that interconnectedness. They have positive attitudes about the subject that they're learning, again, because we're empowering students to have that ownership. They have better relationships amongst each other because now you're not just a kid that I competed against or a kid that I sit next to and do my work. You're a kid who I need to rely on. And so again, it's that idea. I love Jigsaw in my classroom particularly because a lot of times like those kids who would often like join a group and then do nothing, they would also be the kids that once you did a couple of jigsaws, they knew that when they showed up to their mixed group, that they better show up with some information because their classmates were expecting it out of them at that point, right? Like before they could sit in one group and then kind of just coast by, but now it's like that, there's that community pressure that's like, hey, I know that when I show up to that group, if I don't know something or if I didn't write notes or if I didn't draw, then I'm going to be sitting here and my group's not going to have information and then they're going to be upset because then we can't do what's next. So I love that little bit of internal peer pressure too. And then the final thing is Jigsaw is huge for retention. Students remember what they learned better because they owned it, they had to teach it, they had to read it, like they had to sit through it in a lot of different processes. And so if you get a chance, that's the one that I would say always, like, you want to build community, you want an easy plug and play activity lesson that you can apply to pretty much any content area, Jigsaw is your friend.
I always think of grammar, like teaching specific grammar pieces and then coming together and having them teach each other.
I love
Works
it.
well too. What else have you guys used Jigsaw for, or have you seen it used for?
Or maybe another community building activity that you love that helps kind of create that interdependence.
Is everybody like it's 4:30 and our minds are tired? Just know you can join in our conversation at any time if you'd like, or type in the chat.
Well, and Devin, let us know. I'm sorry, where are you at again? Because we can always help model it depending on who your coach is as well.
It's me, Devin, and I would love to connect with you on Jigsaw. It's like it's my go-to plug and play for teaching. Like it was like, oh, giant passage, we're gonna jigsaw this out. Oh, science project, we're gonna jigsaw this. Like it's my easy plug and play. So I would love to connect with you more on it.
And just know Jigsaw doesn't always have to be oral. Kids can have multiple ways of representing the jigsaw to share with each other. So if their strength is sharing that content through maybe a picture, but then they could explain it. If their strength is actually telling it orally, if it's writing, there's multiple ways to use Jigsaw, but it also then helps the students feel less pressure, like that they didn't have to master the entire concept. They had somebody help them master the content to put all the pieces together.
I love that. That's great.
And just like that, if anybody needs stuff, we're happy to help. Ooh, somebody has their hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just thinking of one of my early childhood classes and how we could apply this to, like, since I'm working at a child care center, you know, with the early childhood. And I remember in my class we did this. It was an art project where you started with one person put like a hole in the piece of paper and then started a drawing around it, and then we passed the paper on to the next person, and then they added to that drawing, and then it just kind of like went around the circle, and then you got your drawing back and it was this whole different thing, but everyone's kind of contributed to it. So that's kind of what the jigsaw reminds me of.
I love that. I love that idea of the connection, interdependence, something new from like an entire group, like something that was wholly built from them. That's so beautiful.
I've seen it done with sentences, like making a story come together and all of the students get to write in a sentence, and it changes the flow of things so dramatically, you know, from student to student. That's neat.
Love it.
I'd love to see the art. That'd be cool. Okay, so key point number 4 is just that shift from teacher-centered to learner-centered. Not only the language that goes along with it, but the actual hands-off by the teacher, more facilitator role, and allowing the students to explore in their learning. So one of the examples we have is the students just think this is so fun when they get roles, right? There's group roles. And we want them to use their strengths, especially the ones that are uncomfortable with, you know, a certain topic or a certain subject or certain standard. But we also want them to explore things that are hard for them, their barriers. And so some students are ready to explore right away the barriers and the harder things, and some students want their comfort zone. And so the little images depict the different roles. And we do have, on our last slide, we have an actual handout that you can use, and you can make it your own. You can, knowing your student strengths or the students that you work with or the students that you are helping teachers work with, if you're a coach, you can add to this. And so the first one is the director. They may lead the conversations, they may follow the directions, make sure everyone's learning. And every single group member make sure that this is one of their roles, is to listen to the other group members' ideas. And so that's the director role. The second one depicts a little computer, and this is the information gatherer. They take notes of important information by either typing, writing, drawing, or sketchnoting. And sketchnoting can be like a combination of words and pictures to just capture what they've learned. We went into a 7th grade classroom, and there was an amazing sketchnoter in the room, and she actually drew everything that was being taught that day. And at the end, that was so valuable for her, more so than even just written words, right? Because that's how her brain operates, is through pictures and images. And then they also listen to the other groups and members and their ideas. The third one is the megaphone, and that's the attention keeper. So this group member helps to keep everyone in the group on tasks, make sure everyone has a part in the task to contribute to. And then they can also, if you have some fidgets, you know, available, they can hand out a fidget and help students stay focused in other ways. The time manager is the clock, and this person can keep track of the time, make sure that the group is being productive and gets their work done, lets the group know when they're spending too much time on one task and they need to go ahead and move forward. And then of course, the last one is building in that choice. Why don't you guys as a group create a job? Think about your strengths. This would be fun for students. Think about your strengths, come up with a role that will help your group complete the task, whatever task that is, whatever standard they're trying to meet, whatever objective they're trying to get through. So just the creativeness, and the students usually, like, you find the leaders right away, but then also the ones that are less open to working in groups usually can find their strength and something they're comfortable with and then grow within it.
Does anybody have a favorite way to kind of give students back that ownership of their learning, or empower them to be the ones who make decisions about their learning, or an example, story, anecdote?
I tried with my Montessori class one year to get them to kind of decide where we were going next with our learning. So I gave them options of like the different things that were in our scope and sequence, right? And like gave them a few, but it was really hard because I had first and second graders combo. And so it was really hard for them to make a decision together. So that was kind of interesting. We kind of ended up having more small groups that wanted to do different things than the whole group.
But I think that's still that idea of student-centered learning, right? Like and especially because you created groups, it makes it that much more about the individual learner, because you honored the fact that not everybody sits in that same space, and you were able to like say, you know what, I can shift what I had expected or what I had wanted as a teacher to honor what you all want to create, which is so beautiful. And Montessori does that so well, like amazing. That's awesome. I was just thinking about my daughter is in a chorus class right now, and one of the things that I think is really exciting that it's happening at her school is they are getting to put on a musical this year. And the exciting part is that the teacher is not picking the musical, the kids are picking the musical, and their job is actually going to be to research the musical. And then they have to put some kind of poster or board or teaser up for their classmates to encourage them to vote for whatever musical they want. And then the kids are going to go back and vote and decide what's the final musical that they're going to be presenting. But I thought it's scary as a teacher. Like I thought, gosh, that's a lot of letting go of control. But my daughter and her little friend right now are just so in it. Like they've been meeting at lunch to make this little PowerPoint because they've decided they want to do Into the Woods. And so they're like breaking apart things, and one of them is like focusing on the roles, and then the other one's trying to tease the settings, and one of them is like putting music together. And so that's kind of that idea again of like that shifting from teacher to kids and really letting them roll with it. Another one of my favorites also is Genius Hour. And so if anybody's interested in that, that's another really amazing way to kind of give students that voice and encourage them to really start controlling and driving their own learning. So I think we've reached near kind of the end of where we're at. Does anybody have questions? Janae, I see you.
No, I was just gonna say, I thank you both for diving into this. We just kind of scratched the surface, but we wanted to pull out some key ideas for you to see how the shift has happened in the UDL framework. And so remember, when we're looking at UDL, it truly is a framework, and all of this can be applied and added to your classrooms and things you're already doing. If you are a part of our project, please reach out to any of our coaches that they can help you dive further into this, but also feel free to jump in again for next month's cafe. We'll announce the topic here shortly. Oh, sorry, my dog is gonna bark. I'm gonna let somebody else talk for a second.
I'm gonna drop the UDL guidelines. They are on that page that Alexis is showing right now. But the new UDL guidelines 3.0 are now on the CAST website, and they go into a lot more depth. But we also included all of our resources that we've been studying too as this transition is happening. So we have like the rationale for the updates, why they chose what they chose, which is everything we went over, but their rationale, which is interesting and I think meaningful. And then the changes from the 2.2 to the 3.0, and they're side by side if you're a visual person or you need to see like exactly what has changed if you know the UDL guidelines well. That 2-2 teacher that Becky was talking about on the little video we shared, that website's there. And then the student roles resource that I shared with you is like in a 2-page handout. Kendra, yes, ma'am.
Do you all work with APS?
I know, we'll let Janae talk this one.
So I know APS currently only has, they have one member of their Universal Design for Learning team, and their team member is on maternity leave. So I actually worked with APS forever because I started the initial UDL team there, but we can support in some ways. So we
Just
we
wondering,
have a
'cause there's this like really like a push for the high quality instructional material, and I'm like supporting teachers, and I'm not supporting them in UDL specifically, but I am supporting them in literacy, which includes read alouds. And so UDL goes along with that really nicely. And also like a little bit of a feeling that I don't want to get, like, I don't want to misguide someone,
absolutely.
where it feels like they're not doing what what they're asked to be doing or using. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do, and we can talk later, or if you'd like to coordinate a time with me to meet, because there's certain parameters within our work that we can support, but then there's other parameters that we can't. So absolutely, but I do know all of the Albuquerque Public Schools, they have all of the UDL tools. So they have Co-Writer, Universal, Snap and Read Universal. I'm not sure if they got Equatio, but for sure, I know, especially with the brand new curriculum, with the Savas curriculum, there's a lot of ways that the Snap and Read can help support that as well. So I'm meeting with some of your other structured literacy coaches next Friday. So if you want to jump in on that conversation, I'm happy to help support in that as well, if you'd like.
yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
Sure. I know we value everybody's time, and it's kind of the end of the day. And I do know that some of my coaches have to jump to another meeting. So I do hope that you all will join us again. The next one will be the third Wednesday of the month. So we will be meeting again in October. And keep an eye out on Instagram and Facebook. We're pretty active on there. We totally like to share resources, tools to use. We're also on X. I don't think I'll ever get used to calling it that. But I truly want to thank Alexis and Candace. You guys did a fabulous job. And Hannah, I sent you an email because I do have to jump to another meeting. So let's definitely connect. But you can reach all of us, which is hilarious because you never know who's going to respond. You reach all of us at nmudlcoaches at the crec.nm.org. So please feel free to contact us. We appreciate you guys being here and take a deeper dive into everything that we've talked about. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see you. Thank you.